Don't know anything different.
Okay, right on. Well,
Sounds
I'm in the
good.
middle of America. I'm in Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay,
So
excellent.
it's great to meet you. Before we get into your life as a leadership consultant, there's so many things that are going on with you. I want to begin
Mm,
with 4 years ago, one of the more momentous events of our lifetimes happened with COVID, and no one really knew how long it was going to last and what the ramifications were. So I'm curious with you, how did you make it through that time period, and how did it subsequently change you?
yeah, fascinating question. In my context, if you a little bit about me is I've worked in education for quite some time, 17 years, and school leader at the time of the COVID pandemic. January of 2020, you step into a leadership role in a high school about 1,300 kids, 117 staff members, and 6 weeks later, the world shuts down, and kids are in, kids are out, kids are masked, kids are not, and it was a roller coaster ride for a period of time. One of my responsibilities in our city, which I live, is that 100,000 people, was overseeing all at-home online learning for all high school students. And so, for me, I remember sitting in this very office. It didn't look like this at the time. It was a newly converted home office from a nursery extra room where I would had my computer on top of a ironing board with a camera set up so I could do Microsoft Teams, and my 4-year old and my 2-year old doing stuff on an upside down Rubbermaid container for school. Like, it was intense time. But what I learned through COVID and how it impacted me directly was the importance of those times we have with our family. How I can't allow my own personal and professional ambitions interfere with my role as a husband and as a father. It helped me solidify what it meant to run an online business in a time where people were connecting virtually instead of in person. It helped me as a school leader navigate the complexities of education in a way where now we were looking at safety and wellness as a number one priority, not learning and achievement. We just wanted to make sure our kids were healthy and safe. Personally, also, it came out of a time where they fast forward to 2022. The previous 2 years had really weighed on me through various different avenues, to the point where I had my own health scare and I had to take a step back and like recalibrate. Hey, what am I pushing on? What am I riding in? And what am I okay just letting be? And so, as a leader, I've learned a lot about communication during that time, communication over a medium like this, communication to families and kids, while simultaneously running a business that I was communicating to my team who was all over the world. So, yeah, fascinating time.
Yeah, absolutely it was. Yeah. So I'm curious, with there's so many things that go into what you do. If we were to boil it down to its essential parts, I'm going to put you in
Mhm.
front of a bunch of third graders at career day. One of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
Yeah, what do I do for a living? Well, if I was in a classroom of third graders or my son's fourth grade class and they asked me, I would tell them that I was the vice principal of a high school because they would all be familiar with that.
Yeah.
But what do you do is different than the purpose that you have while you're there. And so I think if I was in a room of adults and somebody like yourself said, "Hey, what do you do?" I would hope that I could stand up in there and say honestly that I live a life of impact, that my life impacts the youth, their families, the parents, the men that I interact with, and that my life of impact is meant to influence the decisions that others do. Not that I want to be a puppet master, but that others can look to me as an example where I can come in, share what I know, share my experiences, impact their lives, and influence the decisions that they're making so that they can make healthy decisions for their families, healthy decisions for their learning, their development, their growth.
So what did you want to be in the third or fourth grade? What was your dream to grow up and
I'm a
become?
firefighter.
There you go.
I went through the whole round, man. I went through firefighter, fighter jet pilot, police officer, dentist. You go
Yeah.
through the whole thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I went through the cop phase when I was a kid because I watched Chips. I was like, I want to be Poncho's side guy. So yeah, I get it. And then I saw Cops when I was a teenager and I was like, yeah, I don't know, maybe not. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so
That's intense. Yeah.
yeah, it is. It's totally intense. It was a total inverse from what I saw Hollywood doing. So let me ask you this. How did these seeds of leadership, helping people, making an impact on communities, Take me back to your childhood. What were these seeds that were planted that grew into who you are today?
I think those seeds were planted through my own experience, primarily in sport. If I was looking at community involvement, how as a youth, my direction was a little bit cloudy. I wasn't, yeah, sure, I wanted to be a firefighter when I was 8 years old. But, fast forward 10 years, I was 18 years old, wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. But through my high school years, I was able to be a athlete. I know God blessed me with athletic ability. That's it. And that opened up opportunities for me to go into post-secondary sport and play college basketball, where I had an opportunity to be put in a leadership position as a young man of that team, lead, hopefully well. In reflection, probably not well at all. As a young man with a poorly developed frontal lobe, I probably wasn't the type of leader on that team that I needed to be. But I got a taste for leadership in that role. But also, it's amazing where we find leadership mentors. There was my basketball coach, of course, was a mentor to me, but my mom, who for most of my growing up, I remember her being a stay-at-home mom. I also see my mom, who worked in a coffee shop and tried to make ends meet while my dad was working construction. And I looked at my mom and her leadership abilities, of how in a different way, she came in, she always had it figured out. She was always people first. She was always like, clear, let's do this. This is the steps you're going to take. But she also asked really good questions.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a time in my life where I thought being a leader, a team captain or a leader of a club or group at the university, meant that I just got to call the shots or tell people what to do. But what I learned from my mom was the power of asking really good questions. And then in my first teaching job back in 2007, we always get evaluated in our first year teaching. And so that was my first year teaching. And I had a mentor who was a vice principal of that school who's very much the same. Very good questions. Questions where you would go in, and I knew that he wanted to get to something. I was like, okay, what does Kevin want to get to? But he would ask the question so I could get there myself. And so what I learned in that is like growing up, two younger brothers, responsible. Like life was not easy, but for me, being responsible, getting a job when I was 14 years old, cooking in a restaurant, bringing home food from the restaurant I was cooking in to feed our family. Uh, the same restaurant my mom was still working at when I came home because she was working the dinner rush. And man, there was just so much complexity to life that I got to see my mom under pressure, my dad under pressure. I learned a lot of leadership skills through them, what to do, what not to do. And then through some mentors, coaches, teammates, and of course, professional mentors that I've had in my life. I'm a product of coaching. I love coaching. I have a coach right now. I don't think it's a bad thing to pay somebody to tell you what to do sometimes.
Yeah.
And so um, I've really treasured the opportunity to connect and now ask conversations of other people because I learned so much through their lived experience. So yeah, growing up, I think it was for, seeing my parents and seeing those other mentors in my life that really instilled that like, hey, I could do this, and maybe just naturally stepped into it. I never was like, hey, I'm gonna be the boss. I'm gonna be the captain. I'm gonna be the principal of the school. That was never my thing to climb the ladder. It just kind of naturally progressed um, into that, and to the point where, hey, here's my experience. I'm gonna keep you from doing the same mistakes. Ask some questions. Let's get you there.
So, who's been kind of overall a hero for you? The ultimate inspiration in your life?
Oh, ultimate inspiration in my life. I look at my dad. My dad is a super hard worker. My dad is still working in construction, even though he is quote unquote retired.
Yeah.
Um, he's not. He just doesn't settle. I talked to him this morning. Actually, it's just like you need to breathe, man. Like work. Oh no, this is great. Might as well do it while I can. I said, okay, good for you. But like, he always worked really, really hard. My mom obviously worked really hard. So I think of like the overall heroes in my life. There's probably not one person who was like, I'm going to be that person. I think in different seasons of my life, there's people I look to. High school, sure, it was my high school basketball coach or youth pastor. My entire life, sure, it's my parents, my grandparents, my grandma. I had a really good connection with my grandma. I loved sitting there across the table from her. We had tea, and she she was always dialed in. This is what I learned from her is like the power of eye contact when you're talking with someone, and you're listening to them. And she used to say, if you put people first, everything else will fall into place. And so be dialed in. So when you look at someone and you're listening and you're having a conversation, it's very powerful. I learned that from my grandma. uh, College basketball coach, mentors in my profession, and of course the people that I've, there's a guy, and his name's Aaron Walker. I was part of a group that Aaron led for a long time, and he's my senior by probably 40 years, but has a lot of lived life experience. Great leader. Yeah, there's so many people that probably in different seasons of my life were my hero, but there's not one that I could point to.
So let's point to one in this next question. If you can meet one person alive on the planet that you find fascinating, that you would love to be around for a little bit, who would that be?
Oh, right now there's a guy. He is a fellow Canadian. He lives in Kelowna, BC. His name is Dan Martell, and he has a book called "Buy Your Time Back." Never spoken with him. Connected in his online presence, his online community a little bit. I'm fascinated by the way that he speaks. I'm fascinated by his communication style, the way the cadence in which he delivers the information to his team and how he impacts other people that draw us in. That charisma of the leader. I find that very interesting.
Yeah,
His content, yeah, great. Like there's the content piece of what he does is very interesting. His book is fantastic. But it's the human nature of how he approaches people and how he
yeah,
presents information. I'm like, how does he do that? So
yeah,
I would love to yeah, go for dinner maybe for 15, 20 minutes even and just listen and just
yeah.
observe. Yeah.
What is that motivation for you to do the work that you do? You've been consistent at it for quite a while. What gets you up every day? What motivates you to not only help others, but to also evolve yourself as a person? What is that for you?
Yeah, I'll circle back to just that idea of impact and influence. I don't want to go through, and this is selfish right now. I don't want to go through my life and look back and say I didn't impact anybody. What was I here for? What was my purpose? And there's days I might not know my purpose, but I know what I can do, and I can show up, be intentional, connect with people, and hopefully make a difference in that person's life that day. And so when I go to work, uh, when I was in the classroom, when I was a school leader, it was how do I support and be there and be intentional and be interactive and engaging and all of that. When I'm online and I'm coaching, it's how do I open up this here's the fascinating thing about people who are in leadership roles. They're not very empathetic at times and they're not very vulnerable at times. And so, how do you have conversations that open up vulnerability, opportunities to develop, to grow? I got this thing on my wall that's from school that I worked in. Know your why, aim for growth, and take ownership. So, if I look at this and I know why I'm doing this to make an impact in the lives of others. And right now, I'm very passionate about being a husband and a father. Like, I'm always passionate about that. I have different things that I do in those areas, but if I know my why and I aim for my own personal growth in that, then I know I'm showing up every day and I can take ownership over my own journey. And my hope is that when I do this, no matter what realm that I'm working in, who I'm speaking with, that this can be a consistent theme for me in my life. And so, yeah, just right now, every day showing up, want to make an impact.
So I see all the books back there. When you were a
Yeah.
kid, what was the book that you read that really either ignited this flame in you to read more or inspired you?
I will be honest with you. I didn't become an avid reader until I did my master's degree when I was 33. So, yeah, about 10, 12 years ago. So, when you look at that, when you say, when you were a kid, what did you read that got you into being I read Calvin and Hobbes comics. That was my go to. Like, I love the
I
comic.
feel you. I was in the same boat. I was a late bloomer. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll be honest, I went through the system. I went through the system that I worked in that was this like conveyor belt education system, and I was just pushing through. It wasn't really built for me, and really wasn't into it. And I didn't really learn to be a learner until I was an adult. Until it's probably done. I went to school for a long time for a guy who didn't want to be a learner. And when I finished my first degree, I did a Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology degree. And when I finished that, I still didn't feel like a learner. And when I did my Bachelor's of Education degree, another after degree, 4-year degree, I started to learn and do some like deep dive in who I was and some self reflection. I hated the journaling process that we had to do as a new teacher, but that journaling process of lesson planning and journaling and doing that as like a 25-year-old, 24-year-old was personally an impactful thing. Professionally was impactful, but for personally, I was like, okay, who am I a little bit in this? And then when I did my master's degree, like 8 years later, 9 years later, it was that's when I really became, I got very interested in the idea of thinking about thinking. And so that's when I became more of an avid reader. And so, um, so many good books, man. I love reading. Because somebody has taken the time to, I have a stack of books on my desk right in front of me. Someone has taken the time to sit and write this book and share everything pretty much that they know and their lived experience and everything, even if it's fiction or nonfiction. I love nonfiction,
Yeah,
is a story that you can learn from. So it's
yeah.
fascinating.
It is. It totally is. So in your various roles over the years, you've had to give good advice
Mhm.
and help people. What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
The best advice I've ever gotten, man. Yeah, I think, I remember sitting there with my mom. My mom passed away in 2015, and she got diagnosed with cancer when she was 41 years old, quite young. There's no cure. And when I think about my mom and sitting there and that idea of, uh, don't I don't like, she would say, "Don't be busy," which means, like, don't distract yourself from the things that don't matter, with the things that don't matter. So, my wife, Kim, matters. My son and my daughter, they matter. Our relationship, our home, our family, the people around us, and how we take care of them, that matters. Don't let the busyness of everything else that you want to do interfere with the things that matter. And there's a lot of times in my life, Joe, that I've let things interfere with what matters most. Maybe it's personal drive. Maybe it's my competitive nature. Maybe it's my need to succeed at times. I'm like, oh, I just need to prove to myself that I can do this. And I can very easily dive into sitting in this very desk for hours on end, diving into work. Work is something you do for someone else. So when I am doing work at my desk, I need to decide, who am I doing this for? Am I doing this for my clients? Am I doing this for the people that I work with? Am I doing this for my family? And if I'm working for my family, then why am I away from my family? And so
Yeah,
that's hard for me. So the best advice I had is really like, don't allow those distractions to impact the things that matter most.
yeah,
Because my mom saw in me in a young age that I was eager, I was an idea person, I had all these ideas of things I wanted to do, and she would just be, okay, that's great, take a breath.
yeah,
Like, let's
yeah,
map it out, let's be intentional.
yeah. No, I get it. I totally do. So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the 17, 18-year-old version of you. You can give that young
Mm.
version of you a piece of advice based on the life you've led, the wisdom you've gained. What advice would you impart on that young version? And would that version of you listen?
It would depend on the approach, if I would listen or not. I think about the people who I would listen to when I was 17 years old, and there weren't many. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I
uh,
get
but
it.
what but what advice would I give myself at 17 years old, 18 years old? Uh, it would be to, honestly, at that time, I was chasing money. And so it would be not to chase money. It was not, it would be to prioritize relationships at that point in my life. I think as a 17-year-old, naturally, I was a 17-year-old young man with athletic ability who had already committed to going to a college to play basketball. I was probably a little bit of a dick at times. And so I would be like, prioritize relationships and people. If you do that, the other things will come. But I think as a teenage guy, I was just like, okay, how am I going to make $1 million?
Yeah,
And then we get older and we realize that that doesn't matter.
yeah, yeah,
And then you look at the relationships along the way. So I would have a sit down with Cam, 17-year-old Cam, if he would sit down and just stop moving
yeah,
and just be like, hey, take a breath, look around you, see your surroundings, dive into the people, pour into people, help other people. That's how you're going to progress, by helping other people. Don't help yourself. And I
yeah.
think Cam from 17 to 21 was about helping himself.
So you had mentioned basketball. That's been a passion.
Yeah.
If you could go back in
Yeah.
time and see any basketball game with your own eyes, where are you going?
Oh, game six, Jordan, like the Bulls versus the Jazz.
Uh-huh.
Oh man, 100%. Like,
Yeah.
to be there, to be that one kid in the background of that infamous shot who's in Utah with the the one kid with the Bulls jersey with his hands in the air, like, oh man,
That
yeah,
that's a
that's
great
everything.
visual. That was that the series where he got the bad pizza?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know.
'Cause you remember in The Last Dance, he talked about getting that pizza, and
Yeah,
he
and
was
they're
really
talking about
sick.
yeah, super sick. The flu
Yeah,
game they called it, or he was super sick.
yeah,
The food poisoning. Yeah.
yeah, I'm thinking that might be it. So, at the end of the day, you've done a lot of things with your life, you've accomplished a lot, evolved into a lot. What
Mm.
are you the proudest of?
Being a dad,
Yeah, I figured.
100%.
Yeah,
100% being a dad. Like this morning, which my son is kind of outside, he's doing okay now, but it's 7:53 in the morning here right now. So I talked to my dad real quick and then we're chatting and I hear my son like coughing and almost throwing up. I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna have to cancel this conversation like 7 minutes before it's supposed to start. He's like,
yeah.
Dad, I'm good. I just was coughing too hard. So like while full transparency, while I'm
Yeah,
on here with you, I'm kind of like
I
looking out
I
the side.
gotcha.
Yeah. So
Dad mode.
uh,
I get it.
yeah, dad mood, but I'm most proud about being a husband and a father. Yeah.
Right on. So, at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, all of your listeners, clients, colleagues, but you
Yeah.
run the show. What's your
Yeah.
perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Who do I think I am? I think
Yeah.
I'm a man in a midlife crisis right now, Joe. No, like I'm sort of kidding. Okay. I'm
Right.
sort of kidding. Who do I think I am right now? I think I'm a man who's in the middle of a transition. I'm in a season of change right now where I'm starting to discover like I'm not a guy in just turned 40 anymore. I'm in my mid 40s. My kids are getting older. What direction am I going? What am I focusing on? But in the all of that thought and conversation, who I am is someone who loves other people. And I know that.
Yeah.
And I know that I can show up every day. And if you and I were to get together with a coffee, my hope would be that you would leave and you'd be like, Cam was dialed in. Like he was intentional. Like he listened to me.
Yeah.
And so I'm a person who listens. I'm a person who uh, I'm an empath at heart. I love people. Yes, they get to me at times and their stuff is heavy, but who I am is just someone who cares about others. And if I put that first, then this whole, you know, midlife crisis thing will work out.
Yep.
Is yeah.
It certainly will. Cam, if anyone wants to dive into all of the myriad of avenues that exist in your world, how can they do that? Reach out, all of the good business.
Yeah, cam at camdhall.com is the best email to connect with me at. Social media across different platforms, a couple businesses and projects on the go. If you're a dad looking for community and connection and accountability, Dad's Making a Difference. I have a podcast at Dad's Making a Difference podcast with Cam Hall. You can listen to that. dmdmastermind.com. And if you're a dad who's looking to get fit so you can live a fit, healthy life with your family, my business Fight The Dad Bod is there to help you along the way. So
I love it. A lot of good stuff going on, man. Thank you for all the work you're doing. It's so great to connect with you.
great to connect with you too, Joe. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Best of luck.